Dr. Sarah Henderson wasn't supposed to be in her lab at 3 in the morning. Then again, she wasn't supposed to break the laws of physics either, but here she was, doing both with a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. The ancient coffee maker in the corner gurgled happily, brewing its 15th pot of the night. Sarah hummed an old Broadway tune as she stared at the holographic equations floating in front of her. Her dark curly hair was tied up in what had started as a neat bun 12 hours ago, but now resembled a bird's nest after one too many frustrated hand runs through it. "That's not right," she muttered, taking another sip of coffee. "Or maybe it is right because it's wrong." She giggled at her own joke, the kind of laugh that only comes after being awake for 36 hours straight. The equation mocked her with its impossibility. Everything said it couldn't work. The math said no. Physics said no. The entire scientific community said no. But Sarah had never been good at taking no for an answer. "What if," she said to her empty lab, "we just ask light really nicely to go faster?" She made another adjustment to the equation, still humming "Don't Rain on My Parade." The holographic numbers shifted, glowed red, indicating an impossibility, then suddenly turned green. Sarah blinked. She rubbed her eyes. She pinched herself. The numbers stayed green. "Computer," she said carefully, "run simulation Alpha 7 again." The air in front of her filled with a visualization of a spacecraft. According to every known law of physics, it should have been impossible for the ship to do what it was about to do. Sarah held her breath. The virtual ship moved. Not just moved. It shot forward, leaving a trail of bent spacetime that looked suspiciously like a smiley face. "Holy shit," Sarah whispered. Then louder, "Holy shit." She scrambled for her phone, knocked over an empty coffee cup, caught it before it could break, and finally managed to dial her department head's number. "Dr. Zhang." "Yes, I know what time it is." "No, this can't wait until morning. I think I just broke physics." "No, I'm not hallucinating." "Well, probably not. Can you come to the lab and bring more coffee?" 3 weeks later, the first test of the Henderson drive turned the scientific community upside down. 3 months later, humanity had its first faster-than-light ship, and exactly 1 year after Sarah's coffee-fueled breakthrough, humanity made first contact with the Galactic Council. The Council representatives arrived in ships that were technological marvels, crafted from materials humans couldn't even name. Their quantum engines were the product of millennia of careful scientific advancement. They had mastered the laws of physics through countless generations of rigorous study. And then there was the human ship that greeted them, powered by an engine that worked because Dr. Sarah Henderson had been too tired to remember that it shouldn't. "This is impossible," the Council's chief scientist said, their translator struggling to convey the depth of their confusion. "Your method of faster-than-light travel violates at least 7 fundamental laws of physics." Sarah, now wearing a slightly neater bun and clutching her ever-present coffee cup, just smiled. "Oh, we asked the laws of physics very nicely, and they agreed to be flexible. Would you like some coffee?" The way the alien's face tentacles twitched suggested that humanity's relationship with the galactic community was going to be interesting, to say the least. The Council's team of theoretical physicists arrived at Earth's orbital research station on a Tuesday morning. They brought with them the most advanced scanning equipment in the galaxy, 14 quantum computers, and a deep sense of professional dread. Dr. Sarah Henderson greeted them in the station's main lab, wearing her lucky constellation-patterned lab coat and holding what was only her second cup of coffee for the day. "Welcome. I set up some demonstrations of the Henderson drive. Would anyone like some coffee before we start?" The aliens exchanged worried looks. Their lead scientist, Dr. Zix 427, stepped forward. They were tall and blue-skinned, with multiple pairs of eyes that all blinked in sequence when nervous. Right now, they were blinking very quickly. "Dr. Henderson," they said through their translator, "we have reviewed your papers. Your equations appear to be decorated with what you call smiley faces." "Oh yes," Sarah nodded cheerfully. They help keep the numbers in a good mood. All of Dr. Zix 427's eyes blinked at once. Numbers do not have moods. Well, not with that attitude they don't. The demonstration began with Sarah pulling up the original Henderson drive designs. As she explained each part, the alien scientist's color changed from blue to an increasingly pale shade of gray. You see, Sarah pointed to a particular equation. Everyone kept saying we couldn't go faster than light because it's a universal constant. But I thought, what if we just treat it more like a friendly suggestion, like a speed limit sign on an empty highway? One of the junior alien scientists made a sound like a deflating balloon and had to be led to a chair. This is, Dr. Zix 427 struggled for words. This is not how physics works. Sarah shrugged. It wasn't, but then we asked nicely. She took another sip of coffee. Would you like to see the engine in action? The demonstration of the actual Henderson drive went even worse, from the council scientist's perspective. The drive didn't just work. It worked while actively contradicting 3 separate laws of thermodynamics. When they tried to measure exactly how it functioned, their instruments either gave impossible readings or simply displayed \__2_/. Dr. Henderson, one of the alien scientists, asked, their voice shaking, how do you deal with the quantum paradox created by your drive's 7th subsystem? Oh, that. Sarah smiled. We just ignore it, and it eventually gets embarrassed and goes away. By the end of the day, the council's scientific team had filled 17 quantum data tablets with observations, developed 3 separate headaches, and begun to seriously question their understanding of the universe. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Zix 427 had one final question. Dr. Henderson, how did you discover this wonderfully impossible thing? Sarah finished for them. Well, I was in my lab really late one night or really early one morning. Time gets funny when you're on your 15th cup of coffee. And I just thought, why not? The alien scientist stared at her for a long moment. Why not? They repeated slowly. You revolutionized faster than light travel because, why not? Sarah beamed at them. Exactly. Sometimes the universe just needs someone to show it new possibilities. More coffee? Dr. Zix 427 declined the coffee, but as they left the station, they could be heard muttering something about humans being the universe's way of playing jokes on itself. Sarah just smiled and started humming as she worked on her next project. After all, several other universal constants were looking quite suggestible today. Dr. Venate, the Galactic Council's chief synapsychologist, was having the strangest month of their 300-year career. They had been sent to Earth to study why human scientists were so unusual. After 4 weeks of observation, they were beginning to wish they had chosen a different profession. Currently, they were watching a group of human scientists in what humans called a break room. It was 3 a.m. Earth time, and none of these humans had slept in what appeared to be days. Yet they were still working, laughing, and making breakthrough discoveries. You see, Dr. Venate spoke into their recorder. The humans appear to function best when they are in what they call a sleep-deprived state. They consume large amounts of a stimulant beverage called coffee and then proceed to violate the laws of physics while giggling. In the break room, Dr. Sarah Henderson was demonstrating her latest discovery to her colleagues. She had somehow managed to make gravity optional for small objects, but only if you asked them politely and played jazz music in the background. The most disturbing part, Dr. Venate continued recording, is their facial expression called a smile. At first, I thought it must be some form of advanced technology. No species could naturally evolve to look so cheerful while dismantling the fundamental laws of the universe. Sarah noticed the alien observer and waved them over. Dr. Venate, come see this. We've taught electrons to dance. The xenopsychologist approached cautiously. On a nearby screen, subatomic particles were indeed moving in what appeared to be a synchronized dance pattern. According to every known law of physics, This should have caused the immediate collapse of reality. How? Dr. Van Eight asked, their voice weak. Oh, Jenny here was practicing her dance moves while running some quantum experiments, Sarah explained, pointing to a young scientist who was currently spinning in an office chair while solving complex equations. The electrons saw her having fun and decided to join in. Dr. Van Eight's recording device made a small sound of protest and shut itself off. Later that day, during an emergency call with the council, Dr. Van Eight tried to explain what they had observed. The humans, they don't just ignore impossibility. They said, their tentacles twitching nervously. They treat the universe like a friend they're trying to convince to join their party. And somehow, the universe says yes. One of the council members leaned forward. But surely there must be some advanced technology we're not seeing. Some complex calculations. Dr. Van Eight shook their head. No. I watched Dr. Henderson solve a quantum paradox while eating something called a candy bar and telling jokes to her computer. The computer laughed. Computers aren't supposed to laugh. The council chamber fell silent. Their secret weapon, Dr. Van Eight continued, appears to be their ability to stay cheerful in the face of impossibility. The more someone tells them something can't be done, the more they smile and try anyway. And somehow it works. Back in the lab, Sarah and her team had moved on to teaching quarks to play musical chairs. The laws of physics stood by, helpless, as humans turned the building blocks of reality into their playmates. You know what the best part is? Sarah asked no one in particular, as she watched particles that shouldn't exist dance across her screen. Science is just so much fun. Dr. Van Eight, who was still watching, made a note in their backup recorder, warning to all future chinopsychologists. Human joy may be contagious. I find myself beginning to smile, and I don't even have the proper facial muscles for it. The emergency alert came on a perfectly normal Thursday afternoon. Dr. Sarah Henderson was teaching a group of grad students how to negotiate with quantum particles when all the screens in her lab suddenly lit up with urgent messages from the Galactic Council. It's eating stars, the Council's chief scientist, Dr. Zix 427, explained via hologram. Their multiple eyes weren't just blinking now. They were spinning in genuine fear. We're calling it the physics enforcer. It's fixing the universe. Sarah took a sip of her coffee, cup number 5 of the day, and frowned. Fixing it how? The hologram showed a massive wave of energy moving through space. Where it passed, ships stopped working. Quantum computers shut down. Advanced technology simply gave up. It's enforcing proper physics, Dr. Zix 427 said. No more quantum tunneling. No more faster-than-light travel. No more bending the rules. Everything must follow the strict, proper laws of the universe. Well, that's not very friendly, Sarah commented, watching as the wave approached another star system. The moment it reached the outer planets, all their advanced technology stopped working. Ships fell from the sky. Power systems failed. It was like someone had turned off the physics cheat codes, as Sarah's students like to call them. Our best ships can't stop it, the alien scientist continued. Our weapons are useless because they rely on the very physics this thing is correcting. 3 star systems have already gone dark. We're running out of options. Sarah watched the data scrolling across her screens. The physics enforcer was moving through space like a cosmic librarian, putting all the universe's books back in proper order. No more fun. No more exceptions. No more asking nicely. How long until it reaches Earth? She asked. At its current speed, 2 weeks. Maybe less. Around her lab, Sarah's students had gone quiet. Even the quantum particles they'd been working with seemed to sense the mood, stopping their usual playful dance and just floating there sadly. Dr. Henderson, one of her students, spoke up. Isn't this exactly what all those alien scientists said would happen? That we can't just keep breaking physics without consequences. Sarah stood up, walked to her coffee maker, and started brewing a fresh pot. Then she turned to face her team with a smile that made Dr. 6427's hologram take a step back. "You know what I think?" she said, her eyes twinkling with that special kind of crazy that had already rewritten half the physics textbooks in the galaxy. "I think this physics enforcer needs to learn how to have a little fun." "But Dr. Henderson," another student protested, "this thing literally exists to stop things like the Henderson drive from working. It's enforcing the rules we've been breaking." "Exactly." Sarah's smile grew wider. "And what are we humans best at?" "Breaking rules," someone suggested. "Better." Sarah picked up her fresh cup of coffee. "We're best at making friends with the rules, teaching them to dance, and showing them that life is more fun when you're a little bit flexible." Dr. 6427's hologram watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as Sarah began pulling up design schematics on her screens. "What are you planning?" they asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Oh, nothing much," Sarah said, her fingers flying over the keyboard while she hummed a cheerful tune. "I'm just going to invite an all-powerful cosmic force of universal law enforcement out for coffee. Anyone want to help me design an impossible spaceship?" Every hand in the lab shot up immediately. After all, impossible was just another word for hasn't met humanity yet. 3 days after the crisis announcement, Earth's orbital research station looked less like a professional scientific facility and more like a college dorm during finals week. Empty coffee cups covered every surface. Whiteboards filled with impossible equations lined the walls. And in the middle of it all, Dr. Sarah Henderson was building something that made the laws of physics cry. "Okay, team," Sarah said, addressing the room full of sleep-deprived scientists. "Show me what you've got." Jenny, her youngest grad student, stepped forward first. Her hair was sticking up in all directions, and she'd been wearing the same "physics is optional" t-shirt for 2 days straight. "We've designed what we're calling the Why Not drive," she said, pulling up a hologram of an engine that looked like it had been drawn by an artist on caffeine. "It works by specifically not working," Jenny explained. "Every time physics says no, it just says, 'Why not?' and does it anyway." Sarah beamed with pride. "Perfect. What else?" Dr. Tom Chen, who hadn't slept in 72 hours and was currently floating upside down because he'd forgotten about gravity, raised his hand. "We've developed weapons that run on pure optimism. The angrier physics gets at them existing, the better they work." The alien scientists, who were watching via hologram, looked like they were having collective nervous breakdowns. Dr. 6427's eyes had stopped spinning and were now just staring blankly into space. "Dr. Henderson," they said weakly, "your team's solutions violate every known law of physics." "That's the point," Sarah said cheerfully. "The physics enforcer wants everything to follow proper rules. Well, we'll just have to be more improper than it can handle." She walked over to the main display, where a simulation showed their newly designed ship. It looked like something out of a child's dream, with parts that couldn't possibly fit together but somehow did anyway. The power core ran on pure happiness, and the navigation system worked by asking the universe very nicely to move around the ship instead of the other way around. "We call it the HMS Impossible," Sarah announced proudly. "The HMS stands for Hold My Science." One of the alien scientists made a sound like a computer trying to divide by zero and had to be led away from their hologram projector. "But how will you build it?" Dr. 6427 asked. "The materials you're suggesting don't exist." "Oh, we're not going to build it," Sarah said, taking the sip from her coffee cup, number 20-something of the day. "We're going to convince it to build itself." She turned to her team. "Who wants to help me write a motivational speech for quantum particles?" Every hand in the room shot up. The alien scientists watched in horror as the humans began writing encouraging notes to subatomic particles, complete with little smiley faces and star stickers. To everyone's surprise, except the humans, it worked. The particles, charmed by humanity's enthusiasm and endless supply of positive reinforcement, began assembling themselves into impossible shapes. "See," Sarah said to the stunned alien observers, "sometimes the universe just needs a little encouragement and a lot of coffee." As the HMS Impossible took shape in the station's construction bay, Dr. Zix 427 made one final observation in their report to the council. The humans aren't just breaking physics anymore. They're teaching physics how to break itself, and somehow, impossibly, physics seems to be enjoying it. The launch day of Operation Paradox wasn't like any other space mission in history. For one thing, the pre-flight checklist included give the quantum engine a pep talk and remind gravity it's more of a suggestion today. The HMS Impossible floated in Earth's orbit, gleaming with colors that shouldn't exist in this universe. Its crew of 20 humans, all hand-picked by Dr. Sarah Henderson, were doing their final preparations. Most of these preparations involved drinking coffee and telling physics jokes to their equipment. "Remember, everyone," Sarah announced over the ship's comm system, "if anything starts working normally, that means it's broken." The Galactic Council had sent representatives to watch the launch. They stood in Earth's mission control, their tentacles and eye stalks twitching nervously as they watched humans casually ignore every safety protocol ever written. "Dr. Henderson," Dr. Zix 427 called through the communication link, "your ship's power core is running on pure optimism and good vibes." "I know," Sarah replied cheerfully. "We tried using pessimism, but it made the engines sad." The mission control room was chaos in the best possible way. Screens showed readings that made senior alien scientists cover their eyes and whimper. The human technicians had set up a small party in one corner because someone had decided that if they were going to break physics, they might as well have cake while doing it. "Launch sequence starting," Jenny announced from her position at the ship's controls. She was wearing her lucky lab coat, which had physics. Rules are more like guidelines, embroidered on the back. "Wait," Dr. Zix 427 called out. "Your navigation system. It's just a magic 8-ball with glitter glued to it." "Yeah, but it's a really optimistic magic 8-ball, Sarah explained. "Plus, we added the glitter to make it feel special." The HMS Impossible's engines hummed to life with a sound that somehow resembled a happy cat's purr. The ship's eye, which they had programmed to be perpetually enthusiastic, announced, "Yay! We're going to go make friends with an unstoppable force of universal law enforcement. This is so exciting." As the ship prepared to depart, Sarah looked at her crew. They were the perfect team for this mission. Scientists too curious to accept impossibility, engineers who treated the laws of physics like polite suggestions, and one physicist who had once convinced quantum entanglement to take a coffee break. "Mission Control," Sarah called. "We are ready for launch. Operation Out Chaos, a chaos entity, is go." The alien observers watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as the impossible ship, crewed by impossible humans, powered by impossible engines, began to move. "But how will you fight the physics enforcer?" one of the council members asked desperately. "It literally enforces the rules you're breaking." Sarah's laugh came through the comm system. "Oh, we're not going to fight it. We're going to confuse it with kindness until it decides to be our friend." The HMS Impossible accelerated, leaving a trail of rainbow-colored particles that danced and formed tiny smiley faces in its wake. As it disappeared into the depths of space, Dr. Zix 427 turned to their fellow council members and said what everyone was thinking. The universe wasn't ready for humans. Back on the ship, Sarah settled into her captain's chair, took a sip of her travel mug of coffee, specially designed to work in zero gravity, parallel universes, and Tuesday afternoons, and said, "Let's go make the impossible possible." The HMS Impossible shot forward, powered by hope, coffee, and humanity's special talent for making friends with things that shouldn't exist. The HMS Impossible found the physics enforcer at the edge of the Centauri system. Or rather, as Sarah liked to think, it found them. The massive wave of pure order looked like a wall of crystal-clear mathematics, erasing all the fun little inconsistencies that made the universe interesting. "It's beautiful," Jenny whispered from her station, in a terrifying, reality-destroying sort of way. Sarah watched through the main viewport as the wave approached. Where it passed, stars seemed to dim slightly, as if the universe was being forced to follow a strict bedtime. Their sensors showed dozens of abandoned alien ships floating nearby. Their impossible drives turned very possible, and therefore useless. "Okay, everyone," Sarah announced to her crew, "remember our training." "You mean the part where we had a pizza party and taught quantum mechanics to play charades?" asked Tom, who was monitoring the ship's happiness levels. "Exactly. Now let's show this cosmic rule enforcer how humans handle the impossible." The physics enforcer noticed them. The wave of order shifted, moving directly toward the HMS Impossible like a teacher who had spotted students passing notes in class. "It's trying to scan us," Jenny reported, watching her console. "But our systems are so illogical it's getting confused." Sarah grinned. "Perfect. Deploy the paradox bubbles." The ship released a stream of what looked like soap bubbles. If soap bubbles could contain tiny pockets of reality, where 2 plus 2 equaled whatever it felt like equaling that day. The physics enforcer paused, trying to correct these bubbles, only to find that fixing one paradox created 3 more. "It's working," Tom called out. "It's getting frustrated." The wave of order pulsed, sending out a beam of pure mathematical correctness. It hit the HMS Impossible head-on. Nothing happened. "Why isn't it affecting us?" one of the junior crew members asked. "Because," Sarah explained, sipping her coffee with a smile, "our ship runs on pure impossibility. The more the physics enforcer tries to make things make sense, the more power we get from not making sense." The cosmic force of order seemed to rear back in confusion. It tried again, sending stronger and stronger beams of correctness at the ship. Each time, the HMS Impossible just absorbed the energy and used it to power the coffee maker. "Now," Sarah said, standing up from her captain's chair, "for Phase 2, open a communication channel." Jenny looked up in surprise. "But Dr. Henderson, it's a fundamental force of the universe. Can we even talk to it?" "Everything likes to talk," Sarah said confidently. "Sometimes they just don't know it yet. Besides, has anyone ever tried?" The crew worked together, creating a communication signal that was half mathematics, half friendship bracelet. They sent it toward the physics enforcer, along with an emoji of a smiling face. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wave of order flickered, like it was blinking in confusion. "Hello," Sarah broadcast cheerfully. "I'm Dr. Sarah Henderson, and we're humans from Earth. Would you like some coffee?" The physics enforcer paused its assault entirely. For the first time in its existence, something wasn't trying to fight it or run away from it. Instead, these strange creatures were offering it a beverage and sending it tiny digital smiles. The wave of order shifted, forming what looked almost like a question mark. Sarah's grin grew wider. "See, sometimes the best way to handle an unstoppable force is to invite it to coffee break. Now, let's teach it about the joy of flexible physics." The conference room of the HMS Impossible wasn't designed for meetings with fundamental forces of the universe. But then again, most conference rooms didn't have a coffee maker that broke 3 laws of thermodynamics or chairs that existed in multiple quantum states until someone sat in them. The physics enforcer had transformed itself into something the humans could interact with, a shimmering pattern of pure mathematics floating above the conference table. Every now and then, it would twitch when it noticed something impossible happening on the ship, which was approximately every 3 seconds. "So," Sarah said, pushing a cup of coffee toward the mathematical entity, "why are you so determined to make everything follow the rules?" The physics enforcer flickered, creating patterns that the ship's AI translated. "Order must be maintained. Chaos leads to system failure." "But does it really?" Sarah asked, taking a sip of her own coffee. "Look at us. We break physics all the time, and the universe hasn't fallen apart. In fact, I'd say we've made it more interesting." The entity pulsed with confusion. Impossible things can not exist. Yet here we are. Jenny chimed in cheerfully. She was knitting a scarf that existed in 4 dimensions, with yarn that changed color based on the viewer's mood. The physics enforcer observed the scarf for a long moment. This violates basic laws of reality. But isn't it pretty? Jenny held up the scarf, which sparkled with colors that hadn't been invented yet. For the first time, the mathematical pattern seemed uncertain. It reached out with a tendril of pure logic and gently touched the scarf. The laws of physics screamed in protest, but nothing exploded. You see, Sarah explained gently, the universe isn't just about rules. It's about possibility, about joy and creativity and trying new things. Sometimes the best discoveries happen when you break a few rules. Rules exist ever for a reason. The entity insisted, but it sounded less certain. Tom, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Hey, want to see something cool? He pulled out a small quantum calculator he'd built. This calculator gives wrong answers on purpose, but they're always the wrong answers you need. The physics enforcer studied the calculator with what could only be described as fascination. This is incorrect. But it's incorrect in a helpful way. Tom demonstrated by calculating the mass of happiness, which shouldn't be possible, and getting an answer that made everyone in the room smile. Sarah watched as the cosmic force of universal law enforcement experienced what appeared to be an existential crisis. Its mathematical patterns became less rigid, starting to flow in more playful ways. Listen, Sarah said kindly, nobody's saying you have to stop enforcing physics entirely. We're just suggesting that maybe, sometimes, it's okay to let things be a little flexible. The entity's patterns swirled thoughtfully. FLEXIBL leads to CAKAO. Flexibility leads to growth, Sarah corrected. Look at your coffee cup. The physics enforcer turned its attention to the cup of coffee Sarah had offered earlier. The liquid inside was defying gravity in small, playful swirls. The coffee is happy, Sarah explained. It's dancing because it wants to. And has the universe ended? No, it's just become a bit more joyful. The mathematical patterns shifted, and for the first time, they formed something that looked almost like a smile. Perhaps, the entity admitted, some FLEXIBL acceptable. Sarah beamed. That's the spirit. Now, who wants to teach our new friend how to play quantum hopscotch? 1 month after the HNS Impossible's encounter with the physics enforcer, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every spacefaring species, all waiting to hear about the resolution of the crisis. Dr. Zix 427 stood at the podium, their multiple eyes still twitching occasionally as they read from their report. The physics enforcer has changed, they announced. It now refers to itself as Flex and has developed what humans call a sense of humor. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. On the presentation screen behind Dr. Zix 427, footage showed the former cosmic force of order playing quantum tag with a group of human children. Reality rippled gently around them, but instead of correcting the ripples, Flex was adding sparkles to them. According to Dr. Henderson's report, Dr. Zix 427 continued. After 3 days of coffee breaks and quantum party games, Flex decided that a universe with strictly enforced physics was, and I quote, kind of boring. Sarah, sitting in the audience with her team, took a sip of coffee and smiled. Next to her, Jenny was teaching a group of young alien scientists how to knit scarves that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Furthermore, Dr. Zix 427 added, Flex has agreed to serve as what humans call a substitute teacher at Earth's physics departments. It now helps students understand the laws of physics by occasionally breaking them in educational ways. The screen showed an image of a university classroom where Flex, still in its shimmering mathematical form, was demonstrating how gravity could do tricks if you asked it nicely. In conclusion, Dr. Zix 427 said, "We have had to add a new universal constant to our scientific models, the human factor. This constant represents the tendency of humans to achieve the impossible through a combination of friendliness, creativity, and what they call good vibes." As the council members discussed this development, Sarah's ship AI sent her a message. Flex had just taught a group of quantum particles to perform a synchronized swimming routine. The particles were now requesting colorful swim caps. The council's chief scientist stood up. "Dr. Henderson, do you have anything to add to this report?" Sarah walked to the podium, carrying her ever-present coffee cup. "Just one thing," she said. "The universe isn't just a set of rules to be followed. It's a friend to be made. And sometimes friends let you bend the rules a little bit, especially if you share your coffee with them." As if to prove her point, reality hiccuped gently, and for a brief moment, everyone's coffee cups refilled themselves. Flex, who was now attending all major scientific conferences as an honored guest, created a pattern that looked remarkably like a wink. "The humans," Dr. Zix 427 concluded, "have not just changed how we view physics. They've changed how physics views itself. And somehow, impossibly, the universe seems happier for it." Back in her lab a few days later, Sarah watched as Flex helped her students with their experiments. The former physics enforcer had become particularly fond of adding small rainbows to successful quantum calculations, claiming it made the math more cheerful. "You know what the best part is," Sarah said to no one in particular, as she watched a group of fundamental particles playing hopscotch with the laws of thermodynamics. "Science is still science. We've just made it more fun." And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the universe itself seemed to smile, because humanity had taught it how.